Here's the thing, nobody's talking about, while everyone was busy obsessing over turbocharged engines and fancy overhead cam setups, Ford did something sneaky with their massive 7.3-liter V8. And, I mean, really sneaky. They made it better in ways most people completely missed. So if you own one of these beasts, or you're thinking about buying one, stick around, because what I'm about to show you might just blow your mind. Alright, let's rewind for a second. Back in 2020, Ford dropped this absolute monster of an engine into their Super Duty trucks. They called it the Godzilla. And honestly, the name fits. This thing is old school in the best way. Passable big displacement, pushrod design. None of that complicated turbo stuff. It's built for people who actually use their trucks. You know, the folks hauling trailers, running work sites, basically beating the hell out of their vehicles day in and day out. Now, when it first came out, people loved it. Contractors were raving about how reliable it was. Fleet managers were happy because it didn't break down every other week. Even the performance crowd started paying attention because, well, there's just something special about a naturally aspirated V8 that makes over 400 horsepower. But here's where it gets interesting. Starting in 2023 and rolling into 2024, Ford started making changes. Not the big, flashy kind that get announced at auto shows with confetti and press releases. No, these were quiet updates. The kind of improvements that only engineers and serious gearheads would notice. People started calling these the Gen 2 improvements, even though Ford never officially used that name. And let me tell you, these changes matter way more than you'd think. So what actually changed? Let's start with the obvious one, torque. In 2023, Ford bumped the peak torque from 475 pound-feet to 485. Now, I know what you're thinking. 10 pound-feet. That's it. That's barely noticeable. Right? Wrong. Dead wrong. See, when you're talking about heavy-duty trucks, especially ones that spend their lives towing and hauling, every bit of low-end grunt counts. Think about it like this. When you're pulling a 15,000-pound trailer up a mountain pass, or you're launching from a stoplight with a bed full of equipment, that extra torque makes a real difference. Your truck doesn't hunt for gears as much. It feels more confident, more eager. And the best part, Ford didn't achieve this by bolting on a bunch of crazy hardware. They did it through smart tuning, better fuel delivery, refined ignition timing, smarter combustion calibration. It's the kind of engineering that doesn't get headlines, but it absolutely changes how the truck behaves in the real world. And speaking of tuning, let's talk about the transmission for a second. The 7.3 pairs up with Ford's heavy-duty 10-speed automatic. In these newer versions, they completely reworked how that transmission talks to the engine. The shifts are smoother now. The power delivery is more linear. Everything just feels more cohesive. Modern engines aren't just about raw horsepower anymore. They're about making all the different systems work together like a well-rehearsed band. And Ford nailed it here. But hold on, because the torque bump is just the surface level stuff. The real magic, it's happening inside the engine where you can't see it. Let's talk about airflow, because this is where things get really interesting. Ford redesigned the intake manifold on these newer engines. Now, if you're not a car person, that might sound boring, but trust me, this is huge. The intake manifold is basically the highway that air travels through to get into your cylinders. The better that air flows, the more efficiently your engine breathes, and the more power it can make. The new design flows significantly better, especially at higher RPMs. And for the performance junkies out there, this means the engine responds way better to modifications. Bigger cams, headers, even forced induction, the new intake handles it all like a champ. But wait, there's more. Ford also made the throttle body bigger. We're talking 92 millimeters now, which is the same size you'd find on high-performance applications. A bigger throttle body means less restriction when you mash the gas pedal. It means crisper throttle response and better breathing at wide-open throttle. Stock, the engine is still tuned conservatively for reliability, but if you're the kind of person who likes to tinker, this hardware upgrade is a game. The aftermarket crowd is going absolutely wild for these newer engines because they respond so well to tuning. Now, let's get into the durability stuff, because this is where the Godzilla really earns its reputation. Ford didn't just make this engine powerful, they made it bulletproof, and the Gen 2 updates take that even further. First up, the valve train. Ford switched to investment cast roller rocker arms with a 1.81 ratio. If you're not familiar with valve trains, here's a simple version. These components control how your valves open and close. Roller rockers reduce friction, which means less wear and tear over time. And that 1.81 ratio, it's pretty aggressive. It lifts the valves more efficiently without needing an extreme kink. This is the kind of engineering that makes an engine last 300,000 miles instead of 150,000 for people who rely on their trucks for their livelihood. That's absolutely critical. Then there's the cooling upgrades. Ford added piston oil jets little nozzles that spray oil onto the underside of the pistons to keep them cool. Why does this matter? Because when you're towing heavy in the summer heat or running hard for extended periods, piston temperatures can skyrocket. If they get too hot, bad things happen. Detonation, warping, premature wear. The oil jets prevent all of that. They're the kind of feature you only see in engines that are designed for serious punishing work. And get this, the exhaust valves are filled with sodium. Yeah, you heard that right. Sodium, under high heat, the sodium melts and sloshes around inside the valve stem, transferring heat away from the valve head more efficiently. It's the same technology you'd find in racing engines or serious heavy-duty applications. It's not cheap to implement, but it dramatically improves longevity when the engine is running hot for extended periods. Now, Ford didn't stop at just making the base engine better. They also expanded how they're using it. In 2024, they dropped the lower output tune from the E-Series. Now every E-Series gets the higher output, calibration's 325 horsepower, and 450 pound-feet. Fleet managers absolutely love this because underpowered work vans are a nightmare. Drivers have to floor them just to keep up with traffic, which wears out transmissions faster. More power from the start means less strain on the drivetrain and ultimately longer vehicle life. Ford also offers a gaseous fuel prep package for fleets that run on compressed natural gas or propane. This version gets hardened valve seats and upgraded materials to handle the different combustion characteristics of alternative fuels. It's a small market, sure, but it shows Ford's commitment to keeping this engine relevant across different applications. All right, so we've covered the production trucks, but let's talk about the wild side for a minute. If you really want to see what this engine is capable of, look at the Megazilla crate motor from Ford Performance. This thing is basically the Godzilla on steroids. Forged internals, ported heads, and power potential. That's borderline ridiculous. People are pushing these engines past 1,000 horsepower with forced induction. 1,000 from a pushrod V8 that started life in a work truck. That's insane. And here's why that matters. Even if you're never going to build a 1,000 horsepower monster, it proves the foundation is rock solid. The iron block, the cross-bolted main caps, the generous bore spacing this engine was overbuilt from day one, which means even the stock versions have tons of headroom for upgrades if you ever want to go that route. Speaking of upgrades, let's talk about engine swaps, because this is where things get really fun. The aftermarket is falling in love with the Godzilla. Companies are cranking out low-profile intake manifolds, standalone ECUs, supercharger kits, all kinds of goodies. And because it's a pushrod design, it's relatively compact. That means you can fit it into places where a modern overhead cam engine would never go. Classic F100s, muscle cars, even some crazy cross-brand builds. Engine builders are obsessed with this thing for three main reasons. One, it's simple. No complex valve trains or timing chains to worry about. Two, the iron block is incredibly strong. Three, massive displacement. 7.3 liters means you've got torque for days right off idle. No turbo lag, no waiting for boost to kick in. Just instant, brutal grunt. For rest-of-mod builds and street trucks, that's pure gold. So why does all this matter? Why should you care about these quiet updates that most people never even noticed? Because they represent something really important in the automotive world right now. See? Big naturally aspirated V8 South are becoming extinct. Emissions regulations are getting stricter. Electrification is the hot topic. Everything is getting smaller, more complex, more efficient. And in a lot of ways, that's good. But there's still a place for engines like this. Engines that are simple, durable, and powerful. Engines that don't require a computer science degree to work on. Engines that can run for 500,000 miles in commercial service without major issues. Ford recognized that, and instead of replacing the Godzilla with something turbocharged and complicated. They just kept making it better. Quietly, methodically, intelligently. That's the real story here. The 7.3 didn't need a complete redesign. It needed refinement, and that's exactly what Ford delivered. More torque, better airflow, stronger components, improved cooling, expanded applications, and massive aftermarket support. The engine that was already impressive in 2020 became even more capable by 2024, all without losing the qualities that made people love it in the first place. So whether you're a contractor who needs a reliable workhorse, a fleet manager looking for long-term value, or an enthusiast who wants a modern big block with insane tuning potential, the Gen 2 Godzilla deserves your attention. Sometimes the best engineering isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about making the wheel roll smoother, last longer, and perform better. And that's exactly what Ford did here. If you found this breakdown helpful, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future deep dives like this. Drop a comment and let me know, are you Team Godzilla or are you holding out for Ford's next move? Either way, I'll catch you in the next one.